Hello, friends, and welcome to Weekly Witness, Texas Impact's weekly podcast designed to help mainstream Texans of faith understand the legislative process and help you engage with the Texas legislature. My name is Scott Atnip, your host and Texas Impact's Director of Public Witness, and I am excited for this week's episode because we welcome Texas Impact's Climate Action Fellow, Becca Edwards, back to the program. Becca's joining us soon after arriving back in the U.S. after attending the first half of the United Nations Climate Change Conference, or Conference of Parties in Dubai. For those who follow along with the program regularly, we had Becca and our Executive Director Bee Moorhead on the last episode giving us a preview of that conference. Bee is still in Dubai, and we look forward to talking with her when she gets home. But before we jump in, I want to note that as of recording, the Texas legislature is not in session for the first time in what seems like forever, and they adjourned without taking any action on school funding, teacher pay, or private school vouchers, thanks in part to all of your hard work. And I think everyone's still trying to figure out what comes next. So we'll give you updates when we know something. If you want to stay up to date, you can always join one of our action teams at texasimpact.org. But for now, I hope we can all enjoy the holiday season. I know there's a lot going on in the world, and we should all be gearing up for what I predict will be a contentious 2024 election season here in the U.S., but I really do hope you can all find some time to rest, celebrate, and find some meaning and hope this holiday season. So with that, let's welcome to the conversation Texas Impact's Climate Action Fellow, Becca Edwards. Becca, welcome back to the United States. How are you feeling?
Hey, Scott. Thanks for having me. I'm a little bit tired, but I'm happy to be back here in the office. I'm happy to be back with my family. It was a great week.
I am sure they're happy to see you, as are we, and you sound great. I will note for those who are, in case I start sounding funny in the middle of the episode, I had 2 vaccinations yesterday, and I'm feeling like chills right now. So if my teeth start chattering, it's not because Becca made me nervous or something. But Becca, we talked 2 weeks ago. How did the COP meet your expectations going in?
Well, I didn't really know what to expect. This was my first COP. I have been to large conferences before, but this was a scale that I had not previously experienced. There's 100,000 participants. The scale of the venue is enormous. It was overwhelming at first, but I started to find a rhythm about the second day. I learned a ton, and I'm so excited that I could be there in person because I think that would have been a lot harder to do, to experience online.
I know a lot of our listeners know that the COP is going on, and obviously we talked about it in our last episode. But can you talk to us some about like what a typical day looks like and what you were doing over there?
Sure. So the COP is a gathering of all the parties to the Paris Agreement, which was signed in 2015. So a typical day is there's a massive schedule. There's multiple tracks going on. Some people can focus on like the Global Stocktake. Some focus on climate finance. There's different days with themes. So there's a health day, a gender day, and some other days like that. So really, the best thing to do is check out the schedule, make a plan for the day. You go to different meetings and observe different negotiations. There's also side events where you can learn more about specific issues like water or nutrition or things like that in different countries. There's plenty to do, lots to take in. It's impossible to do everything you want to do. So I guess developing a plan at the beginning and sticking with it is the best way to get a meaningful experience.
Yeah, as you say, there is a lot going on, and so you do have to focus in on particular areas. And you and B talked a little bit about that in the last episode. But what did you focus on during your time there?
While I was there, my job was to focus mainly on the stocktake negotiations. So the Global Stocktake is an opportunity that's specified in the Paris Agreement for the parties to assess their progress toward the goals that they set forth in that agreement. So the technical report was released in September indicating the progress that the parties had made in that direction. And now at the COP, what's happening is the parties are meeting to negotiate the implications of those findings and recommendations moving forward.
And how's it going so far? I mean, I know we haven't made it to the end yet, but what's the progress being made?
So as of the time I left, they had released a second version of the report. So the way the process works is they have an initial draft called the zero order draft, and then each party has an opportunity to comment on the draft so they can make specific recommendations about language or tone or things that are included in the report or not included in the report or things they would like to remove. And so they have those negotiations over a period of several days, and then a second draft of the report is released. The second draft of the report was released around the time I was leaving, and now there's some high-level negotiations happening with regard to the outcome of the technical report and also the negotiations as the parties work on defining some recommendations about outcomes like how we're going to move forward with our climate goals.
It sounds like there's a lot of technical aspects to this. So for a layperson who's listening, what's at stake in these negotiations?
So what's at stake in the Global Stocktake is the future of climate action. So the Stocktake was our opportunity to see how far we've come and the effect of our action so far. And that paired with the recent scientific findings from the IPCC will be put together to make recommendations about ambition, which is the term the UN uses to describe the goals that each country sets for themselves with regard to climate action. So climate action includes several different categories. One is mitigation, which is reducing further emissions. One is adaptation, which is responding to climate impacts that are already happening, like, for example, drought or sea level rise. And one is the means of implementation. So the outcome of all of these negotiations are specific paths forward on all three of those areas. And what we're hoping to see here at Texas Impact is very ambitious goals on mitigation, so reducing carbon emissions, including ultimately a phase out of carbon emissions, alongside calls for greater action on climate finance. So climate finance is important for developing countries who need resources to be able to contribute to the mitigation efforts required to lower global emissions over the long term.
One of the things I always love to hear from our delegation members when they return home is kind of the nuts and bolts of how all of these things happen. So what has that negotiation process been like from somebody who was there watching it up close?
So it was a lot different than I was expecting. The parties all gather. One of the meetings I went to, the parties were all gathered around a large table. So they were all facing each other. The chair of the negotiations calls on each party when it's their turn to speak. And when it's one party's turn to speak, everyone else listens. And the party has an opportunity to present everything that they have to say. There's no sort of debate like we have in the Texas legislature. You just speak your mind and then you move on to the next person. And like I said, this goes on for some time, and occasionally the points can be contentious, but in general, it's a much more peaceful process than what I've seen in the Texas legislature.
I love that. We could all learn something, I think, from that. Another topic that Texas Impact has been following closely for this COP is the Loss and Damage Fund. And I know Bee talked about that a little bit in our last episode. Is that connected to the Global Stocktake?
It is. So Loss and Damage is a fund that was approved on the first day of the COP, which was historic. We're very excited about that. But the purpose of the fund is to offer financial assistance to developing countries so that they can implement ambitious goals with regard to mitigation and adaptation without having to make difficult choices between development of their economies and poverty eradication. So the reason loss and damage is so important is because we need every one of the parties to the Paris Agreement on board if we're going to be able to reduce global emissions on the scale that is needed. And providing this financing allows those developing countries the ability to contribute to that mitigation effort without sacrificing some other important goals that they're working on at the same time. The Global Stocktake is an opportunity to recognize collectively the progress that still remains to be made on reducing global emissions and to make those calls for robust climate financing through the Loss and Damage Fund.
All right. Appreciate that. Now, the fun part. Becca, you are at home, and there are a lot of people who are trying to follow along, and now you are one of them. Are you still paying attention, and what's the best way that we can track what's happening at the COP?
Certainly. I'm still paying attention. Part of my registration allows me to access to the portal where I can see live videos of many of the negotiations. Also, many of these meetings are available on the UNFCCC website for the general public if you're interested in that. So I will be following along to the best of my ability. I think one of the benefits of being there in person was the ability to focus completely on that. And now that I am home, of course, I have the usual distractions of everyday life. But I am interested. I am interested in seeing the Stocktake negotiations through to the end. So I will be finding time to watch as many of the meetings as I can. I'd like to continue providing information to our viewers through blog posts and things like that. So expect to hear more from me on the Global Stocktake.
Love that. And I would just add that Texas Impact on all of our social media channels has been providing highlights and content. So make sure that you're plugged into Texas Impact social media, our YouTube channel, all of the things, so you can stay up to date with everything that's going on. And I'm sure we'll continue to talk about it here in the weeks and months to come. Becca, anything else before we close out today?
No, I don't have anything else to add. It's been a good conversation.
Excellent. Well, we really do appreciate your willingness both to serve by attending over in Dubai and sharing with all of our listeners. So thanks for all you do. And friends, we hope that you will continue to follow along with the COP. As I mentioned, Texas Impact will continue to resource you and your knowledge and advocacy. So follow along. We'll also continue to update you on the next steps of the Texas legislature. So another plug for the social media. Keep an eye on texasimpact.org for all of the ways that you can get involved. While you're there, I hope you'll consider joining Texas Impact or making a year-end gift. Those funds will support this podcast and the work of Texas Impact year-round. So texasimpact.org, check it out. You can also reach out to me directly at scott@texasimpact.org for more. So with that, I think it's time to close out this episode. So remember, the world needs Texans of faith active and engaged. So let's get to work.
Weekly Witness is hosted by Scott Atnett, engineered and produced by David Fasalo. Our executive producer is Bee Moorhead. The opinions expressed on Weekly Witness are those of Texas Impact and our guests, and do not necessarily reflect the views of our sponsors. Weekly Witness is a product of Texas Impact, people of faith working for justice. Visit us online at texasimpact.org.